Jason from GameRave.com, otherwise known as Danger Boy. This is GameRaveTV. So I haven't fanboyed in a while, and I figured we would take a break from the 27 letter game to talk about something that we just added to the website a while ago, and that's the Neo Geo CD. Now, with the Neo Geo CD, it was basically SNK's answer to make a cheaper, more affordable version of the Neo Geo AES cartridge system. With the AES, its cartridge games, which were these massive double-boarded monstrosities, because they were basically the arcade games, were about $300 each for the games. Not the system, the games were about $300 each. So with the CD system, for a cheaper price point, about $50, you could now have that arcade experience at home, with some caveats and so forth. There are actually three models of the Neo Geo CD, two of which stayed in Japan and one that went worldwide. The original first version was what they called the front loader, and it was just this huge, giant rectangle of a system, and it was actually manufactured in very limited quantities in Japan, and after a while they were like, you know what, we can condense this, make it cooler, etc. And that's where they brought in the second model, the top loader system. Now this is the system that actually got distributed to America and is actually one of my babies. And with the top loader, it basically removed the drive tray instead for a flip top, so that we had less mechanical issues, at least on that front. But more importantly is that it was more stylized. It actually stood out from the crowd, and it's really nice about that. There was also a third version called the CDZ, and this was in Japan only. And there's been a lot of rumors and myths about the CDC system, and basically, long story short, the CDZ was basically just a Neo Geo CD with more cache, so the loading times weren't as bad on that as the other two systems. However, there was a huge design flaw on the CDZ where it wasn't vented enough. So if you tried playing for a long period of time, the system would actually overheat and fry itself, and it'd be a very, very expensive repair job. I've actually seen people that own them drill holes in the bottom and throw PC fans in to keep the system cool and so forth. So between the three systems, if you're going to jump into the Neo Geo, just go for the top loader middle one. It's fine. And that you can actually grab a American version of the system because it's actually region free. Okay. What was really nice about the system being region free is that aside from being able to play both the American and Japanese games with no modification, was the fact that SNK actually had the English text files on the Japanese games. So if you took a Japanese disc and threw it in an American Neo Geo CD, you would be playing in English. There were only about, I think, 8 or 9 exclusive games to Japan that had no English tracks, but they are basically Mahjong games, a quiz game, and Samurai Shodown RPG, which is worth it if you can plow through not being able to understand the game. But, as I said, this situation where the English text files were on the Japanese CDs brings up a very curious situation for the Neo Geo CD. It's actually cheaper and easier to collect the Japanese side of the library than it is the American side. One, there were more games released for it in Japan. On top of the 8 exclusives, there were also about 20 or so other games that never made it stateside. For some reason, the American Neo Geo games are just freaking rare. Like, I've had this system for at least 3 or 4 years now, and when I first tried to figure out if I wanted to go for the American or Japanese side, I originally just picked the Japanese side because I wanted the extra games for it. And after those 4 years have passed, I can tell you, American Neo CD games are like unicorns. Like, they don't exist, which is bizarre as hell. It's even more rare to see complete copies. Within the last week of writing up this video and trying to figure out how I wanted to approach this, I was on eBay, and like, it's ridiculous. Like, a copy of a Japanese game that you could pick up for like 30 bucks would be like 100 to 110 on the American side, basically just to have the packaging in English. Like, it's pretty bizarre. So from a purchasing standpoint, it's actually much better to go for the Japanese library for this system. That, and I like spine cards, but they're in the American ones too, so who cares? So besides just being a price point fix to the Neo Geo. The Neo Geo CD actually had some other neat things going for it. To try and entice people that already owned the cartridge systems to basically buy the same system over again, just in a different media format, many games had brand new soundtracks, where the original cartridges were obviously using the hardware to make the music. The CD ones would have rearranged actual orchestration, and this was just absolutely gorgeous in some points. Like Fatal Fury Special, Last Blade 2 are just absolutely gorgeous sounding and totally worth investing just to grab the soundtrack for it. It also introduced the Neo Geo controller, which would be this guy. Instead of the included joystick with the AES, they wanted to make it more of an actual home game system so that they could try and entice people that weren't just the fanboys. With the controller, it's a little weird. Instead of a D-pad, you basically have the thumb equivalent of an actual arcade stick. You can hear the clicky-clicky, just like the arcade stick. And after the four main buttons, and then a start and select. These buttons are huge. This does not, like, if you guys don't have a Neo Geo at all, let me show you. Like, they're just absolutely huge. It's ridiculous. And while this works in action games and so forth, a lot of the earlier fighting games didn't have controller key assignment options, which means you were stuck with the way the buttons were laid out. If you're playing a game like Fatal Fury Special and you're trying to do one of their ultimate moves, you have to sometimes press this button and this button, or these buttons together, or like just this crazy combination. And if you can't realign those buttons to make it easier to press, trying to play a game is like, well, it's awful. But that's very few and far between, and really only a problem with some of the fighting games. What I will say about this is the Neo Geo is actually, the controller at least, is actually one of the nicest feeling. As long as you can get over the weird thumb issue, this just feels really nice. It's just got a nice curve to it. It's not all bulky and blocky like a PlayStation controller. It's very light. It was a really, really well done controller. However, because it uses the same ports, it's any Neo Geo, be it AES or CD, can use either one's controller. So you've got two joysticks and a controller to choose between what system you want to use. Now, at the time, the Neo Geo had like the superior graphics, etc., because its only competition was really the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. The problem is, in making the Neo Geo CD, SNK didn't make it future-proof. This system should have had better specs, you know, other features, etc., and instead it was basically just a media swap. And this trouble was realized roughly about a year and a half into the system's launch, roughly about 95, 96, once the PlayStation Saturn hit the scene, because you had these similar priced systems that were showing off these great 3D games like Tekken and Panzer Dragoon and Toshinden and Virtua Fighter, and as much as people like me love 2D games like King of Fighters and Fatal Fury, to the typical consumer, it looked like cartoons and kids games compared to the Tekken and Toshinden. And on top of that, with the limited amount of cache and the single-speed CD-ROM, it was clear that the loading times in the later half of the system's life are more or less going to kill it, which is a depressing fact, because as much as this system has been cursed with, you know, long load times, etc., those load times were only really on the last half of the games. In fact, only the last maybe like 20 or so games. Unless you had a game that had huge characters like Samurai Showdown, the early releases actually had really quick load times. In fact, some of the games like League Bowling and I believe Ninja Combat, it loaded once in the beginning, and that was it. You played the game as if it were a cartridge game. So if you are looking for like a quick play, any of the older games work fine. However, once you got into like King of Fighters 96 and Art of Fighting 3, that's when the loading times were just absolutely, God, like it's like, as long as you have something else to do while you're playing the game, you're okay. I think I timed it a while back where I was playing Art of Fighting 3, and I think in 20 minutes there was at least 4 to 5 minutes of load time. Like it was bad, which is even worse for Art of Fighting 3 because in the CD version, the characters, besides losing animation frames, also got shrunk from their cartridge version. So like in the CD they're like this big, and in the original version they're like that big, which, you know, is another blemish to the system. But So the question now is the system worth collecting for if you haven't jumped into it yet? We can go fanboy and we can go realistic. And I think on this one, as much as I love the system, we'll go fanboy. Unless you have to have basically a variant system with variant releases, you don't really need the Neo Geo CD. In fact, between the AES and the CD, the best route to go is a consoleized arcade board, or a consoleized MVS as it's called. And what that is it's basically taking the arcade board and adding some adapters to it, etc., and it basically becomes a console. You can plug it into a TV. You can actually use the home controllers on the arcade board, and you have that way. With the arcade cartridges, they're much more unified in pricing. They're a lot cheaper than the home cartridges. They don't have the loading times of the CD. The only problem and big issue with the consoleized MVS unit is that A, you have to make it, and B, the bootlegging of Neo Geo arcade games is through the fucking roof. So you have to watch out for that. That aside, I love the Neo Geo CD. I was so happy when we added the master list to the GameRave website, and we will be doing reviews and GRTV episodes with it and so forth. In fact, there's already the Fatal Fury special on the website, and once we are out of our temporary digs into our own place, you're going to see a lot more of this, a lot more Saturn, etc. on the website, and I just cannot wait because I love the Neo Geo CD, and the Neo Geo for that matter, just as much as I love the PlayStation. But thankfully there weren't 1,000 variants to collect for the Neo Geo CD. Alright, that said, we're done with this episode of GameRaveTV. Next episode we will get back to the 27 letter game, and I still don't know what letter we're going to do because I have to figure out what box is next. But that said, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Take care, you guys. Have a good one.